Their headlines had called it a medical mystery. For nearly 2 years, 30 of the world's most respected doctors had traveled from different countries to examine 8-year-old Sophia Bennett, the only daughter of billionaire businessman Richard Bennett. Every specialist reached the same frustrating conclusion. Her body was healthy. Her test results were almost perfect. Yet she refused to speak. She barely ate. She never smiled. Most days, she simply stared out the window of her enormous bedroom, holding the same worn teddy bear she had carried since she was a toddler. Richard had spent millions searching for answers. Private hospitals. Experimental therapies. Luxury rehabilitation centers. Nothing changed. Medical teams adjusted treatments. Psychologists developed new plans. Neurologists ordered more scans. Still, Sophia remained trapped in a silence no one could explain. The mansion slowly became quieter. Staff walked carefully through hallways, afraid of making noise. The once cheerful home now felt more like a museum than a place where a child lived. Richard blamed himself. 2 years earlier, his wife had died unexpectedly during an overseas charity mission. While Richard buried himself in work to escape the pain, Sophia quietly withdrew from the world. No amount of money seemed capable of bringing her back. One morning, by the following morning, the atmosphere inside Langston Children's Medical Center had changed completely. For the first time in months, Sophie smiled. It wasn't a large smile. It lasted only a few seconds. But every nurse on the pediatric floor noticed it immediately. The previous afternoon, Daniel had simply sat beside her bed with his old acoustic guitar. He didn't lecture her. He didn't promise miracles. He didn't ask her to be brave. Instead, he quietly played the lullaby his late wife used to sing to their daughter, Emma. Sophie had closed her eyes. Her breathing slowed. Then, after weeks of refusing even small meals, she whispered one word. Again. The nurses looked at one another in disbelief. It was the first time she had voluntarily spoken in days. Over the next several afternoons, Daniel continued visiting after finishing his maintenance shift. Sometimes he played music. Sometimes he carved tiny wooden animals while Sophie watched with curiosity. Sometimes they simply sat together looking out the window without speaking at all. Slowly, tiny changes began appearing. She started eating. She laughed at Emma's silly jokes. She agreed to participate in physical therapy. Doctors celebrated each small victory. Yet they couldn't explain why. Medical tests showed improvement, but no new medication had been introduced. During one staff meeting, the hospital's chief neurologist quietly addressed the team. "We've been treating her illness." He looked toward Sophie's room. "Mr. Carter has been treating her loneliness." The words settled over the room. Meanwhile, billionaire Victor Langston watched everything from a distance. For months he had spent millions bringing in 30 of the world's leading specialists. Every expert focused on scans, blood work, experimental therapies, and complicated treatment plans. Daniel had arrived with nothing more than kindness, patience, and genuine attention. One evening Victor approached him. "I don't understand." Daniel smiled gently. "What don't you understand?" "My daughter trusts you." Daniel looked through the window at Sophie and Emma laughing over a board game. "When my wife passed away," he said quietly, "Emma stopped speaking for almost 3 weeks." Victor listened carefully. Everyone kept asking her to be strong. Daniel shook his head. She didn't need strength. What did she need? Someone willing to sit beside her until she felt safe again. Victor lowered his eyes. For the first time, he realized that while he had purchased the world's best medical care, he had unintentionally left very little time simply to be a father. His business empire had always demanded another meeting. Another flight. Another acquisition. He convinced himself it was all for Sophie's future. Yet now, sitting beside her hospital bed, he wondered how many moments he had traded away. The next morning, Victor cancelled every meeting on his calendar. His assistants were stunned. Board members protested. Investors demanded explanations. Victor gave only one answer. My daughter needs her father. For the next several weeks, he remained by Sophie's side. He learned how to brush her hair. He helped with homework. He read stories aloud. Sometimes he even played simple guitar chords Daniel patiently taught him. The transformation became remarkable. Sophie laughed more often. She slept peacefully. Her appetite returned. Physical therapy sessions became easier because she finally wanted to recover. Doctors never claimed Daniel had performed a medical miracle. The treatments were still essential. The therapists still worked tirelessly. The medications still mattered. But they all agreed on one thing. Healing accelerated when Sophie no longer felt alone. Months later, Sophie was finally discharged from the hospital. Hundreds of employees lined the hallway, applauding as she walked out holding her father's hand. Daniel and Emma quietly stood near the back. Victor approached them carrying a large envelope. I can never repay what you've done. Daniel smiled. You don't owe us anything. Victor handed him the envelope anyway. Inside was not a check. It was a proposal. Victor wanted to establish the Carter Family Center for Pediatric Emotional Care, a new hospital program dedicated to supporting children and parents through long-term illness. The center would provide family counseling, music therapy, play specialists, and comfortable spaces where parents could spend meaningful time with their children. I'd like you to help design it, Victor said. Daniel looked surprised. I'm not a doctor. Victor smiled. No. But you reminded all of us what medicine sometimes forgets. A year later, the new center opened. Doctors, nurses, therapists, musicians, teachers, and volunteers worked together under one roof. Above the entrance hung a simple inscription chosen by Sophie herself. Every child deserves someone who stays. At the opening ceremony, reporters asked Victor the same question everyone wanted answered. Did the poor single father instantly cure your daughter? Victor shook his head. No. He looked toward Daniel. He reminded my daughter she still had reasons to hope. He paused. And sometimes hope gives medicine the chance to work. The audience applauded. Emma squeezed her father's hand. Dad. Yes. Mom would be proud of you. Daniel smiled through tears. I hope so. Years later, Sophie grew into a confident young woman who volunteered at the very center that had helped her heal. Whenever frightened children arrived, she would sit beside them, hold their hand, and say the same words Daniel once said to her. You don't have to be brave today. You just don't have to be alone. People remembered the headlines about 30 doctors and one poor single father. But those who knew the real story understood the truth. The doctors never failed. They fought every day with extraordinary skill. Daniel simply brought something no prescription could provide, a patient heart, unwavering compassion, and the quiet presence that reminded one little girl she was deeply loved. And sometimes, that becomes the beginning of healing no machine can measure.